Today we're going to be looking at the president's powers. Several different categories of powers. We'll start off with the president's executive powers. As you can see from the slide, he has three main executive powers: the appointment and removal powers, executive orders, and executive privilege. The appointment power is basically what it says. It's the president's power to appoint people to different jobs. You can see all the lists of jobs on the screen, 1 to 5. Things like ambassadors, diplomats, cabinet members. We'll talk about the cabinet as we go. Heads of agencies, judges, people in the armed service. So again, that's the appointment power. With that comes the removal power. So basically anybody that he appoints, he can remove. He also has the executive order power. This is very controversial power for the president because basically with it, the president is making a rule or a law almost. What the executive order does is it institutes a rule or regulation for the executive branch. And we're going to look at more in depth at the executive branch as we go, but it's very vast. There's a lot of different people that work in the executive branch. It has the force of law, and you can see the examples there, and you can see how different they really are. You can see President Bush issued one with Sudan, which basically said we needed to follow laws that we'd passed before. President Clinton's much more simple. President Obama's is very controversial. A lot of you probably know about it, and it's on immigration, and we're going to look at that a little closer as we go here. But again, very controversial. The executive privilege, really pretty controversial as well. Maybe not in our time so much, but if you see President Nixon there, President Nixon really tried to use executive privilege to hide a lot of the recordings that he made in the White House and so on. There was a Supreme Court case about this that, basically didn't go in the president's favor. So it's the idea that the president can refuse to release information to Congress or a court, but it can be challenged in the courts. President's diplomatic powers, you can see the first one is to make treaties. You can see what a treaty is. The president can negotiate these. Much more likely you're going to see somebody like the Secretary of State negotiating these. But with a treaty, it must be approved by the Senate. Executive agreements are kind of like executive orders are to a law. All right, an executive agreement is just a pact we make with the head of another state, and we don't need Senate consent for that. Power recognition, again, very simply is what it says. It's just us recognizing another state, accepting it as an equal. President's military powers, we know that he's commander-in-chief. We know that he shares war powers with Congress. But you can see he has final authority for military matters. He can use the armed forces without declaring war, domestically or on foreign soil. He can do a lot during war. He has a lot of power. You can see he could do things like ration food or gas in the country in the name of war. All right. Again, he can use the military to keep domestic peace. Call out state militias. This hasn't happened in quite a while. But again, the president has pretty strong powers when it comes to the military. You can see the War Powers Resolution, which we passed during Vietnam, and it put limits on the presidential power. You can see there 1, 2, and 3. Really, again, it limits the president's power, gives Congress a strong say-so into a war. Number three, we actually thought about doing that with Iraq when President Bush was in office. Um, Again, we've never really done that, and it's something that may be tested, as you can see, in court if the president refuses to comply. President's legislative powers, he can do a lot here. Really, he has the message power here, what he wants to see passed by Congress. You can see he has that platform with particularly the State of the Union, but also the budget message and the economic report. But overall, he can send legislation to Congress at any time. The president's big tool as a legislator is the veto, and the fact that when Congress passes a bill, he can return legislation to Congress. You see that a lot. President Obama has vetoed a lot of bills and probably will veto a lot more here in his last 2 years. Um, and a lot of times just the idea of a president saying, hey, I'm going to veto that, will keep the bill from even going through the House and Senate. Last is judicial powers. Again, pretty self-explanatory. The president can grant reprieve, postponement, pardon, clemency, commutation, amnesty for federal crimes. If it's a state crime, the governor has to do it. But the president has these powers, and it's interesting that we have a picture of Nixon there because Nixon had these powers when he was president, but he also was given a presidential pardon by President Ford for his crimes with Watergate and everything there. That's all. Thank you.